Peace and much love, Zin Uru here. Welcome to the latest installment of Message from the Minista. This week's message is the metaphysics of the Hhdop, the metaphysics of the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. Happy Hip-Hop Appreciation Week to all my nobility out there. This year's theme is peace, and this year we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. And as a matter of fact, this film is actually being made on the date of the 20th anniversary of the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace, May 16th, 2001. And this video right here is being filmed on May 16th, 2021. So this is the 20th anniversary of the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. And this video will be out Monday, May 17th, which will be the kickoff of Hip Hop Appreciation Week 2021. And our theme this year for Hip Hop Appreciation Week is peace. And if there's one thing in life that when I'm gone or whatever is said and done about the story and the life of Zin Uru, I just wanted everyone to know that my entire being lives and loves and feels peace for all of humanity. And that for me, hip-hop, the intelligent movement, that my purpose itself is peace in that way. And feel me when I say peace too, because it's like peace by any means necessary for real. Because what's happening in the world right now is not peaceful. The stresses that people are under, and I talk about these week in and week out, whether it's financial stress, whether it's physical stress, the body's feeling stress, whether it's emotional stress, whether it's mental stress, whatever kind of stress that is that the world is creating for humanity, and that metaphysically we are creating for ourselves in that way, that we can all find that palace of peace, that place of peace. My name's Zin Uru. I say my name's Zin Uru. It means the promised land, because I feel at home wherever I stand. I made that rhyme, and then a couple years after I made the rhyme that said my name's Zin Uru, it means the promised land. I was researching the Israelites' journey from Egypt into the promised land, which would be Israel, in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis. So Moses leading the people to the promised land was leading the Israelites back to Israel, to their own city-state. Now that means something different here in 2021, but for those with ears to hear and eyes to see, we're talking about the actual Israelites in that way, the original Israelites in the original promised land that Martin Luther King spoke about. To me, it's Hip-Hopia. And when I said my name, Zin Uru, it means the promised land. When I was researching in the book of Genesis, I found out that the Israelites traveled through the wilderness of Zin, Z-I-N, and that the city that they built was called Uru-Salem. Uru, U-R-U, means city, and Salem means peace. So to go from the desert into the promised land, and the city of the promised land was Uru-Salem, the city of peace. Remember, there's no J's in Hebrew. So Uru-Salem was the city of peace. And when I was doing that research, it really hit me, something inside me began vibrating at that. Because the teacher had already said, Zin, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, he's speaking hip-hop into existence. I Have a Dream speech is hip-hop into existence. And as he was discovering that and sharing that with me, it was a profound moment. And then to just, like a year later, when I'm doing the etymology on Zin Uru, to find out that my name Zin Uru that I had rapped in a song called New Religion, that I had rapped, my name Zin Uru means the promised land. It's just something I said. So I feel at home wherever I stand, just meant that I felt like I was in the promised land wherever I was, that Hip-Hopia, this is way back in 2006, really 2005 when I took the names in Uru, but this is when I'm understanding what that is back in 2006. that all of a sudden I was like, yo, Hhdop is the promised land for Hhdoppas. And it's different than the story of the Israelites, but there are some similarities there. You know, there are some similarities there. That's why we get these ancient stories. That's why these books are preserved and we have them in our hands. No matter who's saying they are the true Israelites in the world, all of us can glean something from the story itself and how it applies to us directly as Hhdop, because this man right here was inspired on the I Have a Dream speech to speak into existence the promised land. Hhdop is the promised land. And so to have my name, you know, it's just something when I met the teacher, I gave the story a few weeks ago, I won't get into it again, but when I said, yo, I'm starting my journey as a Hhdop like this in the Temple of Hip Hop, my name is Zin Uru, I didn't know that I was going to have such a deep meaning into the promised land, but that being peace. So although the message tonight is the metaphysics of the Hhdop, the metaphysics of the Hhdop Declaration of Peace, we're really, for those with eyes to see and ears to hear and a soul to feel, I'm speaking about the metaphysics of Hhdop itself. You know, the being hip to the hop. Hip is awareness, hip is a knowing, it's intelligence. Hop is a form of movement, it's a springing forth, it's action. So hip and hop is intelligent movement, it's intelligence springing forth out of us. So something inside me sprung out of me and said, yo, call yourself Zin Uru, when I was reading the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And said, call yourself Zin Uru, that's a dope name, just something told me that. Something told me, you know, I don't know if I told this part of the story, but before I declared myself Zin Uru, I'd written this out, this very piece you see right here that's framed. I'd written that out staying in the teacher's garage. Okay, this was back in 2005. I wrote this word out by reading the Emerald Tablets of Thoth in his garage, and wrote that out. That night we went out to a interview that he was doing, and he was driving the Escalade, and me and Coach Cheese were sitting in the back, and I heard a voice in my head, and teacher said something about Moses, and I heard a voice in my head say, Moses never made it to the promised land. And I knew back then, I had these long, like I have dreadlocks now, you know, for those who don't know, you know, underneath my head wrap here, I got dreadlocks. But this is my second set. Like back then in 2005, I had big old long Rasta dreads, big old thick dreadlocks I've been growing for like 10 years. And they were like they're down to about my waist. And when I heard Moses never made it to the promised land, I realized that I had to cut my dreadlocks off at that time, because I wanted to make it to the promised land. And not that I was Moses or anything like that, but I wanted to make it to the promised land. And Hhdop is the promised land. And teacher hadn't even shown me that yet. You know, that I Have a Dream speech is the promised land, that Hhdop is the promised land at that moment. This was all in the spirit. This is all the intelligence. This is the hip and the hop, the intelligence springing forward, the intelligence moving out. The inner to the outer, the hip to the hop. Hip, H-I-P, the inner, hip, I, to the outer, H-O-P-O, the outer, inner to the outer. Start seeing the metaphysics here, because as this lesson gets going on, you're going to see how that works not only in your individual life as a Hhdop, but how it's going to work for us collectively when I read the Hhdop Declaration of Peace. Because it's very important for us to understand collectively how the mind of God is working through each and every one of us right now. And once we become aware, we start working with the mind of God. We start working with God's will as opposed to against God's will, and not in accordance to God's will. Now, on one level, it's literally impossible. Everything is God's will. But on a deeper level, to be atoned, we spoke about this a few weeks ago, to be atoned, to be at one atonement with God, at one ment with God, we've got to be working with the will of God and not working against the will of God. Especially those of us who are Hhdoppas, especially those of us who see Hhdopia in our lifetime, especially those of us who see the Hhdop Declaration of Peace and it resonates with us. So keep in mind, as this lesson's going on, that this is the metaphysics of the hip hop declaration of peace, but actually the metaphysics of hip hop itself, the inner to the outer. So I hear Moses never made it to the promised land. I say to myself, I'm going to cut off my dreads. I go back that night. I'd already written this word out in my sketchbook and colored it all in. I have like a graffiti book I usually keep with me, and I'll just carry markers around with me, and I'll just draw out words or pictures or whatever it is. It's just a form of meditation for me. Graffiti art, before I was an MC, I got introduced to graffiti art way back in 7th grade. I was out in the middle of the barren wasteland suburbs of Antioch, California, just out there in that workman's town, just kind of this desolate town in and of itself. I mean, it was a nice enough place to grow up. I can't complain like that. But there wasn't a lot of hope other than working a full-time job as a laborer somewhere, or things like that. I didn't know I didn't know nobody on the upside of life, doctors or lawyers or anything like that. I just knew the working class, the landscapers, the mailmen, all the secretaries, the people who actually hold the working world together, the so-called salt of the earth. That was the kind of people I was growing up with. And so, as I grew older, I grew my dreadlocks out, and I made my way up to the mountains, and I began studying different religions of all the world, But I grew my dreads out because I was resonating at that time with Bob Marley. But I never really was like, I'm a Rastafarian, because I just felt something different inside me. I was drawn to, I was drawn to Christianity. I was drawn to Zen Buddhism probably more than anything. I was drawn to the Tao and Taoism. I was drawn to Hinduism, So I started studying all these different world religions, but the dreadlocks helped me, they were like antennas to God in that way. I was communicating with the earth. I was swimming in rivers and lakes and climbing through mountains and rocks, and moving from, up in the mountains back down to the city. I was in a punk rock band with my brother. I was doing all of these things, and I was growing these dreads out, and then all of a sudden, I'm out on tour with the teacher KRS-One, and I hear a voice in my head say, Moses never made it to the promised land. So I knew I had to cut off that first set of dreads that I had. I went back to the teacher's crib that night, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm going to get up tomorrow, I'm going to get my dreadlocks cut off. Am I going to do it myself? Am I going to go to a barber? How's this going to work out? And then I'm flipping through my art book, and I see this. And that's where I learned graffiti, was back in Antioch, California, in 7th grade. A friend of mine, David, had moved up from East LA. He was a Mexican brother of mine, and he moved up from LA, from Los Angeles. And he had just witnessed somebody get murdered. Somebody got blown away with a shotgun. This is in 7th grade, so like 13 years old. I met this kid, and he had grown up in East LA, and his mom. It was in the Boyle Heights area. He wasn't from Boyle Heights, but he was from that area. Him and his mom saw somebody get blown away by a shotgun, by a sawed-off shotgun in front of him. And so his mom was like, I got to get my son and my daughter out of this area. This is so violent. My son's already, hanging out with the gangs, and he's already breaking out and spray painting all over everything. And so this dude, David, man, shout out to David wherever you are. Big up, my G. His mom moved him out of there up into Northern California with a family member. They stayed up there. And so he ended up, in school with me, and we hit it off because he loved rap music. I loved rap music, and so he started hipping me to a lot of music that I'd never even heard before. And so that was dope. He made me a couple mixtapes, and so I was hearing music, from Los Angeles and things that I hadn't heard before. Because remember, there's no internet back then, very little radio. This is back, mid '80s, probably sometime in the mid '80s. So it was 1986, let's say. So life was a lot different back in 1986. But one of the things that the mixtape was cool, and his stories from LA were fascinating. waiting because I didn't even know what was going on in the world like that. Like, how do you know? It's like different worlds. I mean, people got murdered in our city, but no, I never heard no kids seen a dude get blown away with a shotgun right in front of him at a street light and have him move out of town. That was something new for me to hear, And so, but he had this style of art, and so he would draw and everything, but he was actually a graffiti artist, like a real one, like out there painting and doing murals and things like that. But anyway, so he showed me how to do bubble letters, showed me how to do characters, taught me how to just, how to use the use of color. And so I was always an artist and always liked to draw, but he just switched up my whole style right there. And I was a natural at it. Like all of a sudden I was writing, I was writing out, people would give me like lunch money and trades, if I draw their name out in fat letters and color it in. So it was like it was my earliest entrepreneurial spirit with hip hop way back in 1986 with the graffiti art. Now, as I grew older, I got into music, I got into skateboards, I got into cars, I got into other things, but I always took art with me as a form of meditation, as a form of escape from the world, as a form of expression. And so I was sitting there looking at this in the teacher's garage, thinking about cutting my dreads off, and I seen this word Zin Uru, and I said to myself, yo, that would be a dope crew name. I said, that's a dope name for an MC. Zin Uru, wouldn't that be a dope name for an MC? And I said, yo, that's my dope name. Zin Uru, that's my dope name. That's my name right there. And so the next morning I got up, it's like 7 a.m. I went to bed, I only got like 4 hours sleep, maybe 3. And I was just sitting there and I was just so excited. I got up early the next day and I found a barber and I was the first person there. He was opening up the door and I'm walking up. He's like, oh, hey. He's like, you need a haircut? He was joking with me because he saw my long dreadlocks. I said, yes, sir, I do. And so he was like, it's about time. And he was joking and laughing. But this dude was like a military barber. I'll never forget, man. He actually took some satisfaction over cutting those dreadlocks off. He took some satisfaction over it. But yeah, I just remember he was trimming each one off and just watching these ropes hit the floor. Just watching my ropes hit the floor and then him just buzzing my head. And I was like, yo, and I just remember Moses never made it to the promised land. I'm gonna make it to the promised land. Now this is that metaphysical meaning because God calls us to things. God calls us to things before we're even aware of what God is calling us towards. It's like we're discovering what God already knows along the way. Always, like always, we're always just discovering what God already knows about us. That's why the wise are the ones who surrender to God in every way, in all things surrender to God. So I'm just sitting there just thinking this is a dope name and this sounds cool. And years later, 2 years later, a year later, year and a half later, I'm discovering that the teacher's discovering that not only is hip hop the promised land, but I'm discovering, yo, my name's Zin Uru, it means the promised land, because I feel at home wherever I stand. And yo, I was sitting there thinking, like metaphysically speaking, like how deep is that well, let's see, when was the date of this? August 28th, 1963. Okay, August 28th, 1963, the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King. 1963, the teacher in 2005 says, yo, Zin, hip-hop is the promised land. Spoken by Martin Luther King in the I Have a Dream speech. Now hear me for a minute, 1963 to 2005, that's what? 42 years, 41 years. 40 years. How long were the Israelites in the desert? 40 years. We didn't know that math when that was happening. We didn't see that math as it was happening, but it was happening. Why? Because God saw it first. Do you realize that there is a sight inside of you that is always seeing ahead of time, always preparing you ahead of time? A lot of people want to, especially with this kind of new agey thing going on, always want to manipulate God instead of having ourselves be manipulated by God. That's a huge difference right there. To be hip-hop, to be intelligent, springing forward, you got to be manipulated by God. God's got to be moving you towards things that you didn't even know existed, towards things that you didn't even prepare yourself for. And if you're hip-hop, realize this, that God is moving us as a culture towards something. And it's about time a lot of us wake up to that. Because, the thing about God, when God wakes us up, hey, son, it's time to get up. We got work to do. Oh, okay, Dad. I'll go back to sleep for a minute. Yo, son, time to get up. We got work to do. Let's go. All right, Dad. All right. Yeah, we got work to do. Yo, get your ass out of bed. We got work to do, That's the rude awakening you're going to get if you don't wake up, because like these warnings, these awakenings keep happening in most people's lives, and they are not listening. They just keep going back to sleep. They keep hitting the snooze button on life, on God. We ain't got no time to waste here. Can you not see God at work with the I have a dream? 40 years later, the man who declares I am hip-hop discovers that hip-hop is the promised land spoken of by Martin Luther King and I Have a Dream speech, the teacher. How is it that 40 years later, after he speaks us into existence, that the teacher discovers that hip-hop is the promised land? The same way in my own microcosmic way, the same way in my own hip-hop life, my name's Zin Uru, it means the promised land, and then discover that it literally does. What does your name mean? What do you call yourself? What are the divine synchronicities in your life? Because I know there are more than enough. There are more than you can even remember. Do you have faith in those divine synchronicities, or do you have faith in the television and the lies of the media and the lies of the world? Which one is your faith? Hip-hop? Now, if you want to even get deeper in like Genesis and the Exodus and, Moses moving the Israelites through the desert into the promised land, and Aaron and, all of this stuff that's going on, these Israelites are wilding out. Can you imagine moving hip-hoppers into a city that we call Hip-Hopia right now in 2021? Can you imagine this unruly bunch of people? And I'm not talking gangsters. I'm talking about conscious hip-hoppers. I'm talking about those of us aware of the culture. Ain't none of us like no bosses. Ain't none of us want no leadership. Ain't none of us want to be told what to do. Ain't none of us want to be organized. And I know this through experience because I've been spending my last 15 years of my life trying to organize hip-hop, realize hip-hop don't even want to be organized. Probably because we're traumatized by being organized by the Babylon system or America or wherever we're living at. So we don't want rules and regulations because we're living in a society that has all these laws that aren't working in the right way. But we do have something called the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. May 16, 2001, a delegation of hip-hoppers went to the United Nations and had hip-hop officially declared and recognized by the United Nations UNESCO that hip-hop is an international community of peace and prosperity. Way back in 2001, May 16, 2001, June, July, August, September, 4 months before the New World Order declared that they were in charge when they knocked down the Twin Towers. What is God doing? Oh, God already declared hip-hop as an international culture of peace and prosperity. We already beat the New World Order at their game. Why? Because we're the true world order. We were there first. We were here first. We'll be here after. They're just whirling out of existence, worlding out of existence right now. It is what it is. It's happened before. What are we going to do this time, though? We're going to do this time, hip-hop. We're a wholly integrated people, have an omnipresent power. What are we doing? What are you doing with your life right now? And I'm not even going to brag right now, but I got to be serious with y'all. I have 15 years of nonstop work speaking this same speech, saying these same things. I have 15 years of evidence, of hardcore evidence of nonstop work reaching out to the hip-hop community and the hip-hop nation, unbroken, nonstop, 15 years solid. My credentials are impeccable when it comes to hip-hop and hip-hop culture, the temple of hip-hop, the gospel of hip-hop, and the hip-hop declaration of peace. As a matter of fact, I've been waiting 15 years, 16 years just to put this knowledge out the way that I'm putting it right now here on this video. I knew this 16 years ago. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just keeping it real with you, just so you know who's actually talking to you right now on this video camera. I'm not playing around with this. A lot of people are just catching up to where a very few of us were at 16 years ago. Most of y'all aren't even caught up to where some of us were at 16 years ago. And when I say a few, I'm talking like 3 or 4, for real. Now, some of you was young, so like, you're catching up right now. There's a lot of us, a lot of people my age, in their 40s right now, who had this message come to them time and time again, who still don't have the faith in themselves because they don't have any faith in God. And if they do have faith in God, they're afraid of it. And I know the struggle. I know what it's taken for me to get here. But hip-hop, why don't we just start picking up our pieces right now? Why don't we just start picking up our pace right now? Why don't we just start recognizing who we are right now at this very moment? So as the old world falls, as it inevitably does, and as it's falling right now, we don't have to just pick up our pieces, wake up to a rude awakening. No, we could already be in the process of building our new nation right here, right now. This is a call out to y'all. Y'all know me, those who know me. If you're embarrassed to talk about hip-hop around your family and even post it on your Facebook page and you're just embarrassed of hip-hop, you're just embarrassed of God. You're embarrassed of yourself. That's just low self-esteem, right? Get over yourself. Get over your low self-esteem. Rise up. Be empowered. It's the only way to live. It's what you want. It's what God wants. Why not? Why waste anyone's time, especially yourself? Like I say, we only got this one life. We only got this one life. What are you going to do? Just waste our time? Waste the life away? What's the consequences of wasting a life? You may not even get another one if you waste this one. You may not. In a way, since we are reincarnated souls from an ancient time, we're living right now in the consequences of our past actions, our past failures, our past mistakes, ours. We could blame it on the ancestors, but at one time we were the ancestors of ourselves today. We're to blame for the fall of humanity. Like literally. We wouldn't be in this situation if we weren't. Even if just one of us. So we've all got this collective karma going on right now in that way, but karma is overcome through forgiveness. We can forgive ourselves. We can forgive one another. We can ask God for forgiveness, and then all of a sudden the karma gets cleared up. There's no more karma with that because forgiveness is coming, and forgiveness is a higher vibrational frequency than karma. And once we start being forgiven, we start being attuned attunement with God. Isn't that a better place to be than where we're at right now? The mass surveillance, the cops shooting young people, the institutionalized racism, the poverty, people starting to see the gas prices, food prices, rent prices, car prices, everything's starting to rise up. People out at work, out of jobs, unemployment's at a low, high. People don't even want to work at the jobs that they used to take pride in anymore because they feel there's like a purpose in life, and who wants to keep peddling poison to other people? The system failed. It succeeded for them, but they are finite thinkers. We are eternal thinkers. We are eternal being. They're just an experience for us. We are the reality itself. We're the thing itself. But it's like their system that so many are dependent on in thought, okay? In thought, in thinking. That's the so-called Babylon system. That's the so-called, what they would call the land of Egypt that the Israelites were escaping from. That's that. The promised land is a state of mind. It's a state of being, it's a state of heart, it's a soul, but it's also a land, like a literal physical land mass. Hhdop that we could live on and raise our own children on. We could purify our water on, restructure our water on, grow our own food on, grow our own destiny on, grow our own peace on. And it happens first in the mind. And really it happens first in the spirit, and then the mind hears the spirit and then listens to the spirit and acts upon what the spirit is asking. Moses never made it to the promise. It was like Moses never made it to the promised land. Moses never made it to the promised land. Moses never made it to the promised land. I kept hearing that voice in my head. I got to cut off my dreads because my dreads remind me of Moses. I had a beard too, you know. I was like, you know. And these dreads is different. Like I took a different approach to these dreads. I took like the Nazarene approach to these dreads. Smaller, thinner, more refined, more kept. My other ones were like some wilderness knots, you know, wilderness knots. Knotty dreads from the wilderness. These ones are refined, keep them wrapped, right? Because this is what the promised land feels like to me. This is what the promised land means to me. This is what the promised land means to me. Patience. The temple of Hhdop. Christ. Crystallography. The tree of life. Ancient texts. Meditation. I have a dream, Martin Luther King, my name. What does the promised land mean to you? What do you call yourself? Why do you call yourself? Why are you you? We said it months ago. Why are you you? We asked the question, why are you you? Let's get into our notes. The metaphysical meaning of the Hhdop Declaration of Peace. Before we read the Hhdop Declaration of Peace, metaphysics, beyond the physical, you know, beyond just the physics. But never forget, when speaking about metaphysics, the physics of the metaphysics. The meta is just the thought process, the idea, the inspiration, but the physics have to be done. This was just the metaphysics. The name Zin Uru pops into my head. I read it. I go up to the teacher after I cut my dreads, say, yo, I'm Zin Uru. And he's like, yo. Show him I cut off my dreads. He's like, yo, a new spirit has been born, you know. We had the idea for the gospel of Hhdop. That's the metaphysics. The idea was the metaphysics, the inspiration the teacher had. But then we had to do the physics of the metaphysics. We had to perform the action, the actual physics of the metaphysics. It could be a great idea all day, but if it's not brought out into reality, what's the point of having an idea? You know, before this book was a reality, this book was in existence. This is the physics of this is the physics of this. This led to this. But we held this in our hand. We got this at Kinko's. We have this in our hand. Teacher gave this copy to me in 2007. Okay? And then I held this in my hand, or 2006. I held this in my hand, felt this in my hand, prayed over this in my hand, studied this book daily. And then this came into existence in 2009. But this was used to visualize. I would hold this and picture this. Picture handing this book to people. I used to picture myself up on stage just handing these out, and then it actually happened. So the visualization part, that's the metaphysics. But the actual physics is that this book got printed up. There were phone calls made. Teacher typed it into existence, made Kinko copies so we could hold it and feel it. Then this came into existence in 2005, but this is the physics of the metaphysics. People get too caught up in the meta of it, but they forget the physics of it. Meta's cool, it's fun, but the physics is the reality. The physics is the job that has to get done. Like the Hhdop Declaration of Peace, it's a real document. The meta has been done of it, and even the physics has been done of it. It's been given to the United Nations. We've handed out probably 150, 200,000 copies of it at least. Probably 500,000, really. If I think worldwide, there's probably over 1 million copies of the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace that's been handed out in different countries for years. So people have this book or they have this document in their hands, but there is a physics behind it. It's like an instruction manual to the promised land. It's a code of conduct to the promised land. Let's give a quick review on the three natures of hip hop. For those of you who don't know and aren't aware of what the three natures of hip hop are, Hip Hop Declaration of Peace isn't going to make as much sense. There's a deeper meaning to the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. When we study it using these three natures of hip hop and knowing what the spellings are. And I'm a little surprised. I'm a little surprised recently. Dude, there's a lot of you out there been around the Temple of Hip Hop 10, 15 years. You still don't really realize what the three natures of hip hop are and why they're important. I'm calling you out right now because it's the 20th anniversary of the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. If you're claiming that you're hip hop, if you're claiming that you're Temple of Hip Hop, if you're claiming the gospel of hip hop, if you claim the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace, you better know what you're talking about because you're going to start getting called out on it. We're in our 40s now. We don't got no time to waste with this. Quit wasting hip-hop's time, for real. Quit wasting God's time. Get out of the way then for those who really can. And for those putting in the work, it is appreciated on all levels, but tighten up your scholarship, tighten up what you know. There's no excuse. Three natures of hip-hop. We'll just go over these really quick because this is the physics of hip-hop, the physics of the metaphysics of hip-hop. Hip-hop, number one, capital H, lowercase I, lowercase p, lowercase h, lowercase o, lowercase p. Hip-hop is one word. That equals our unique spirit, our unique collective consciousness, the creative force behind hip-hop's elements. Notice the spellings. Hip-hop is the name of our lifestyle and collective consciousness. So when you see hip-hop culture written as consciousness, capital H, lowercase I, lowercase p, lowercase h, lowercase o, lowercase p, culture, capital K, lowercase u, lowercase l, lowercase u, lowercase t, lowercase u, K-U-L-T-U-R-E, lowercase r and lowercase e. When you see hip-hop culture spelled as one word like that, that's talking about our lifestyle and collective consciousness. That's going to become real important when you look at the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. Second nature of hip-hop, capital H, lowercase I, lowercase p, space, not a dash, space, capital H, lowercase o, lowercase p, equals the creation and development of the 9 elements here: breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, the street entrepreneurialism. It is what we call ourselves and our activity in the world. Hip-hop is the name of our culture. Now there's two types of hip-hop culture we're talking about here. The conscious hip-hop culture, which is the lifestyle is the hip-hop culture, the creative consciousness of the hip-hop culture. And then there's the second form of hip-hop culture, which is hip-hop with the space between it. The capital, which is the 9 elements, it's the creation and development of the actual hip-hop consciousness. See? Hip-hop consciousness is like the meta, and the hip-hop itself is the physics. It's the metaphysics. It's getting brought forward into the world. And here's actually where it really is something you can actually hold on to like this. Lowercase h, lowercase I, lowercase p, dash, lowercase h, lowercase o, lowercase p equals rap music product and those things and events associated with rap music entertainment. Hip-hop is a music genre. That's important to know too, because we're protecting that too. That's our intellectual property that we're creating as hip-hoppers. That's our exchange for goods and money at times. So don't get it twisted. Make those products, make those things that you could sell for money or trade for other resources. Put those hands to work. But get this, see those 3 natures of hip hop? There's 3 spellings right there. I don't see a capital H-I-P dash with a dash in between it, dash H-O-P, capital letters is hip hop. I don't see no dash in there with that. Other hip hop groups and organizations can say that, but if you claim a temple of hip hop, no, this is the natures of hip hop. And I don't see capital H, lowercase I, lowercase p, capital H, lowercase o, lowercase p with no space between the words. I don't see that in here either. Do you? No, it's not written in here for a reason. So if you consider yourself a scholar on this book right here, this is the three natures of hip hop, and that's it. That's it. You're not bringing other natures in and then claiming your temple of hip hop and claiming that, no, get in alignment with this, okay? Get in alignment with this. Don't waste my time, because people just wasted my time this week. That's why I'm passionate about this. Don't waste my time. If you don't know this, don't be wasting other people's time. Get with this. Okay? And I'm saying that out of care for the culture and care for you and care for our unity of thought. We have to have unity of thought to move forward across all these nations in the world. Shout out to my brothers and sisters in Colombia and all of South America. Shout out to my brothers and sisters up in Canada. Shout out to my brothers and sisters all over the United States of America. Shout out to my brothers and sisters in England, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Africa, in Nigeria, in Spain, in France. Shout out to all the hip hoppers all over the world, in Japan, in China, in Hawaii, in Russia. Shout out to all the hip hoppers worldwide, all over the world, breaking, MCing, graffiti, art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, street entrepreneurialism. Shout out to hip hop. Shout out to everyone who's put forward the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace in their cities and handed out and read and taught from the gospel of hip hop. Shout out to all of you. Big up, big up. Let's just tighten it up. Let's just tighten it up. That's why I'm so serious about what I'm saying, because we need to tighten up our game. We need to tighten up on this now. The next generation is going to expect some form of organization from us. What are we handing off to these 20-year-olds, these 18-year-olds coming up right now? What are we handing them? So let's be about it. Let's be about these three natures of hip-hop and how they are spelled here. Let's have some respect for the name of our teacher, KRS-One, in that way for putting this down. This book was certified by Cool DJ Herc, the father of hip-hop culture. This book was certified by Busy Bee, by Grandmaster Caz, by Cindy Campbell. This book was certified by all of the pioneers, all of them. This book is certified. So these three natures of hip-hop, this is what is certified by the collective of hip-hop's icons, fathers, mothers. Now take that in mind, because we're going to read from the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace now. The metaphysics of the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. Now, if you got a copy of the Gospel of Hip Hop, you can turn to, do your own study on the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. And really, you should read the 13th Overstanding, the Hip Hop Activist, the whole thing. It's very important to read the 13th Overstanding, the Hip Hop Activist, because that's really talks about what it means to get into the 14th Overstanding, the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. So study the Hip Hop Activist. It's very important, because that's what the work of the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace falls under. If you've assisted with the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace in any of its forms, then you're a hip hop activist. So read that, and then come here and then read the 14th Overstanding, the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace, on page 549. And you guys can go ahead and read the intro. There's like a few pages there. I don't want to get into that now, because that's time to do on your study, but it just talks about the history of the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace and how it came into existence. A short synopsis on that. I'm just going to read the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace as it is. Straightforward, this is what we hand out. The Hip Hop Declaration of Peace, page 552 in the Gospel of Hip Hop. The Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. This Hip Hop Declaration of Peace guides hip hop. Now remember, pay attention to the spellings here. I don't want to go over each and every time that is spelled, but remember that this hip hop as consciousness, this hip hop as culture declaration of peace guides hip hop culture, guides hip hop's culture. Realize, see that? There's the metaphysics right there. Hip hop is consciousness, the conscious culture towards freedom from violence, and establishes advice and protection for the existence and development of the international hip hop as consciousness community Through the principles of the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace, we, hip-hop culture, realize hip-hop culture. That's God's sight. That's God's culture as hip-hop, the conscious hip-hop, the conscious movement. We, hip-hop culture, establish a foundation of health, love, awareness, and wealth. Hhdop, we spoke about this last week. Peace and prosperity, we spoke about this as well, for ourselves, our children, and our children's children forever. For how long? Forever. For how long? Forever and ever and ever and ever. We will be here forever. Do you hear me? Get what I'm saying. We will be here forever. To establish a foundation of health, love, awareness, and wealth, peace and prosperity for our children, for ourselves, ourselves, and our children and our children's children forever. For the clarification of hip-hop's meaning and purpose, or when the intention of hip-hop is questioned, or when disputes between parties arise concerning hip-hop, notice the spellings once again. This is so important. Get that spelling, get that into your head, get that into your soul, get that into your consciousness. Hip-hoppers shall have access to the advice of this document, the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace, as guidance, advice, and protection. The first principle, hip-hop. Hip-hop is a term that describes our independent collective consciousness. What? Hip-hop is a term that describes our independent collective consciousness. Independent, I was saying this, that's how I found Zin Uru. That's my independent collective, was the promised land. That's our independent collective consciousness. What you call yourself? Well, my name is Zin Uru. It means the promised land. I call myself, I am hip hop. That's independent. My name's Zin Uru. Collective consciousness, hip hop. First principle, hip hop is a term that describes our independent collective consciousness. Ever growing, it is commonly expressed through the elements of breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism. Wherever and whenever these and future elements and expressions of hip-hop culture manifest, hip-hop culture as consciousness, the conscious culture, manifest, this hip-hop declaration of peace shall advise the use and interpretation of such elements, expressions, and lifestyles. Okay, so let's go back to the first principle real quick, because if we're ever growing, it is commonly expressed through such elements. These are the 9 elements. Commonly expressed. I'm sure you fit into one of these, either the way you dress, the way you think, the way you speak, the way you rap, the way you do your art. You beatbox? Are you a DJ? How do you play your music? Are you a dancer? The way you dance, the way we dance, the way we do all of these things. Wherever and whenever these and future elements and expressions of hip-hop culture manifest. Now remember, this is conscious culture. Wherever this manifests in the world, the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace, hip-hop, that's hip-hop as culture, C-U-L-T-U-R-E. The Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace, that's like the culture you could see. But the other culture is the culture you feel and know. It's the voice of God that you feel. It's the intelligence springing forward in you, in us. This declaration of peace shall advise the use and interpretation of such elements, expressions, and lifestyles. Get your scholarship. That's the interpretation. Get your scholarship. Know why you're saying what you're saying and why you're doing what you're doing. Are you hip to your hop? Second principle. And that first principle, that's the metaphysics behind it. Get to the metaphysics behind it. This is guiding us somewhere, to a place, to an actual book. This used to be an idea. Just like this book used to be an idea, but now it's a physical thing that we can touch and grab. Hippopia is this where the Declaration of Peace is guiding us towards. Hippopia is an actual physical place that we can see, touch, smell, and feel. That's ours as well. And it's just as easy to make that as it was to make this. It may even be easier to make that because there's more of us working on that than those of us who worked on this. Get what I'm saying here? This is our independent collective consciousness. Collective consciousness, doesn't that mean we should all be thinking, at least on a basic form, a certain way that benefits us all towards health, love, awareness, and wealth? Shouldn't we all be on this frequency right now, this visualizing this place of health, love, awareness, and wealth for our children and our children's children forever? Man, wherever two or more are gathered, there I am also. Oh, let's get 1 million hip-hoppers focused on this and focused on the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. Wherever two are at, I am there also. Wherever 1 million hip-hoppers are at, there is hip-hop also. There is God also. There is that intelligence springing forward also. It's real. Second principle, hip-hop culture respects the dignity and sanctity of life without discrimination or prejudice. Hip-hoppers shall thoroughly consider the protection and the development of life over and before the individual decision to destroy or to seek to alter its natural development. That's what the New World Order is doing. They're seeking to destroy and alter the natural development of the human, of humanity, of life itself. Not just us as people, but they're trying to control the dog. They're trying to control the animals. They're trying to control the nature. They're trying to control the weather. They're trying to control all these forces that are going to destroy them eventually, because it's going to be a bounce back towards them. It's already happening. So they're trying to do that. We're not. We're respecting the sanctity of life as it appears to us. All of it, we consider life way before the immature acts of destruction. That's atonement, that's attunement, that's that metaphysics I'm talking about. That's the meta, that's the vision beyond. And then the physics is the actual action of taking care of life itself around us. And the best way to do that is to have our own city and our own gardens and our own buildings and our own schools, our own currency, our own books, our own libraries, our own temples. Come on, wake up. The third principle, hip-hop culture respects the laws and agreements of its culture, its country, its institutions, and whomever it does business with. Hip-hop does not irresponsibly break laws and commitments. These are universal laws right here. And, you know, as hip-hoppers, we find ourselves in nations with certain laws that we don't got to irresponsibly break at times, you know. Running red lights. That's a decent enough law. It keeps people from getting in wrecks, you know. It's against the law to steal unless you're the government. Then it's there. They think, you know, they live by a different set of rules. But, you know, amongst one another, we have our own laws. You don't go over and just steal your neighbor's car. Like, that's a human law. That's not, just because the government tells you don't steal your neighbor's car, but they steal everybody else's car all the time. We're not talking about them. They're a bad example. What's the example? We're living amongst each other. Well, a lot of us are a lot of humanity are law-abiding citizens. You know? That's why it's easy for them to control, because they're taking natural things too. They're taking ideas that have been around forever. Thou shalt not steal. Where have we heard that before? They steal all the time. Of course, the government steals all the time. They steal. That's all they do is steal. They don't have anything of their own. They don't even exist without us. They're just living off of our charity. You know, we remove our charity, they just disappear. All of them. Third principle, though, let's read that again. Hip-hop culture respects the laws, respects them, and agreements of its culture. That's our culture first, is hip-hop. Its country, let's get our own country, hip-hopia. Its institutions, let's build our own institutions, and whomever it does business with, let's do business with one another. Of course, we're going to do business with non-hip-hoppers and those outside of hip-hop. You know, but let's do intelligent movement business with everyone. That's just common sense. Good business brings good business practices, brings happy customers, brings happy results. Happiness right there. You know, being honest in the things and in our commitments too. We don't irresponsibly break laws or commitments. That's good metaphysics right there. That's going to give a good return to your life when you don't break your laws and commitments. But unjust laws, that's another thing. That's another thing. There are unjust laws out there. So that's why we don't irresponsibly break them, but we can responsibly break laws and commitments. We do have a responsibility towards truth, towards God, towards one another, to the vision. We do have that. So there is a responsible way that we have to maybe sometimes break laws or commitments, but God be responsible with it. Perform responsibility. And we're not there yet collectively. We're not there yet collectively to actually be able to define our responsibility because we're not organized yet in that way. Let's get organized. Come on, let's wake up. Let's get organized in our thought, and then we'll get if we're organized in our thought, the meta, then we'll get organized in the physics. We'll get organized in the reality that we live in the day-to-day living, in our lives. Fourth principle, hip-hop is a term that describes our independent collective consciousness. As a conscious way of life, we acknowledge our influence on society, especially on children, all children. And we shall forever keep the rights and welfare of both in mind. Hip-hop culture encourages womanhood, manhood, sisterhood, brotherhood, childhood, and family. We are conscious not to bring any intentional disrespect that jeopardizes the dignity and reputation of our children, elders, and ancestors. Wow, this is ancient knowledge. This is built into our DNA. This is what resonates with us. Womanhood? Isn't there a problem with that going on in the world right now with the way that they think that a woman is empowered because she's up there dancing sexy and making money and doing all kind of debaucherous things? Same with men. Manhood is just a bunch of debauchery now? That's not manhood or womanhood. That's not. It's childish. It's immature. Womanhood, manhood. Our ancestors knew what that meant because survival depended upon manhood and womanhood, sisterhood and brotherhood. Like literally, humanity's survival actually depends on womanhood, manhood, sisterhood, brotherhood, childhood, and family. And childhood and family, yeah, childhood, how special is that to actually have a childhood for people, for children who can, there's so many children who grew up without childhoods. 7 or 8-year-olds who have to be adults right away, like that ain't fair to nobody. Ain't fair to nobody. And shout out to those of you who overcome that and overcame that. And I'll even put myself in there just realizing the things at 7 and 8 years old that I had to realize that was presented to me in life, man. Made me grow up quicker than some of my friends, Just some things that I saw, some things that I experienced. We are conscious not to bring any intentional disrespect that jeopardizes the dignity and reputation of our children, elders, and ancestors, hip-hop's ancestors, hip-hop's children, and hip-hop's elders. Come on. That's all of us are included in those three right there. We're all of those. And we're responsible to all of those. We are one another, collective consciousness, independent but collective. The fifth principle, the ability to define, defend, check it out, defend and educate who? Ourselves is encouraged, developed, preserved, protected, and promoted as a means towards peace and prosperity and toward the protection and the development of our self-worth. Through knowledge of purpose and the development of our natural and learned skills, hip-hoppers are encouraged to always present their best works and ideas. Wow, through knowledge of purpose and the development of our natural and learned skills. Our human skills, learned and natural. Like some people are natural MCs. Some people learn it. Some, the movie, The Natural, with Robert Redford back in the 80s, great movie called The Natural. He was born with a natural talent to play baseball, but he developed the skills too. His father taught him to develop the skills that he naturally had towards baseball. Check out that movie. That movie is brilliant. The Natural by Robert Redford, that is a metaphysical movie. That is the hero's quest. That movie is brilliant. The music is brilliant. The acting is brilliant. The story is brilliant. The sets are brilliant. The dialogue is brilliant. There's something deep going on in that movie. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to always present their best work and ideas. Put your best foot forward, my nobility. Big up to those of you who are putting your raps out for the first time this year, participating in the 16-bar challenge with for Hip Hop Appreciation Week. Shout out to those of you who are putting your music out this year, putting your artwork out this year, putting your business out this year. Shout out to you. You know how much courage it takes in 2021 to put something new out in the world? Big up to those of you doing it. And big up to those of you who have done it and are putting new works forward. That's real. That's what real hip hop is about. And check it out too here on the fifth principle. The ability to define, defend, and educate ourselves is encouraged, developed, preserved, protected, and promoted as a means towards peace and prosperity and toward the protection and the development of our self-worth. Get to it. Get to it. The sixth principle, hip-hop culture honors no relationship, person, event, act, or otherwise wherein the preservation and further development of hip-hop's culture, principles, and elements are not considered or respected. Hip-hop culture does not participate in activities that clearly destroy or alter its ability to productively and peacefully exist. Mainstream rap music, check that out. You are the antithesis of what this book and document is saying. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to initiate and participate in fair trade and honesty in all negotiations and transactions. The sixth principle, hip-hop culture honors no relationship, person, event, or otherwise wherein the preservation and further development of hip-hop's culture, principles, and elements are not considered or respected. Wow, we don't even got to honor America, American citizens. According to this, not the way America's acting right now. They are disrespecting and showing us no honor. So we don't have to have no relationship, no person, no event. We don't have to honor any relationship, person, event, or otherwise wherein the preservation and further development of hip-hop's culture, mainstream, they only exist because we exist. And we can exist without them. They can't exist without us. And that goes to the bigger picture of the New World Order. They only exist because of the true world order, and the new world order can't exist without us, but the true world order can exist without the new world order. Are you seeing the metaphysics here that we're getting to? Hip-hop culture does not participate in activities that clearly destroy or alter its ability to productively and peacefully exist. We see that's self-destruction. We can clearly see it in the world, in the mainstream. We can see that. The way that, they're trying to tear down the families through institutionalized racism, through sexism, through outright lying, media manipulation, all of that. We can see them doing that. We don't got to honor any of that. We don't even participate in those activities according to the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. We don't even have to participate in the world's activities. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to initiate and participate in fair trade and honesty in all negotiations and transactions. That's good business right there. That's street entrepreneurialism right there. That's the way things work. Seventh principle, the essence of hip-hop is beyond entertainment. The elements of hip-hop culture may be traded for money, honor, power, respect, food, shelter, information, and other resources. However, hip-hop and its culture cannot be bought, nor is it for sale. Hip-hop cannot be transferred. That's why hip-hop can't even be sold out, because hip-hop it's a consciousness. You can't sell out a consciousness. You can only sell out your brothers and sisters, but you can't sell out their consciousness, and its culture cannot be bought, nor is it for sale. You can't even buy or sell the culture. Get with God. Get with the organic nature of God, what this is actually talking about. Our collective consciousness. This is ours. We just build our own institutions. We just build our own radio stations. We just build our own record labels, and we don't even get to be part of all those worlds. We can call them something else. We don't call it a record label. We call it our collective music agreement. Something like that, We don't even call it, we can call it whatever we want to call it in that way. As long as we all agree upon it, and our pioneers and our elders are respected in it, come on, let's go. Quit wasting your time trying to please the Babylon system. It's a fallen system, and if you grab onto it and you're trying to please them all the time and you're living with them and gripping onto them, you're going to fall with them. Watch. I'm telling you, in the next 10 years, it's going to be very, very clear. By the end of 10 years from now, in 2031, who tried to sell us out, who wasn't with the culture, who was just trying to get by and use hip-hop to their advantage, and now they don't even exist. They're no longer heard from, and we have stories and examples of how not to be and how not to act, while those of us who are actually out here really doing the work, really setting aside our time, our life for the preservation and development of this actual culture, because we see what this is all about. See where we're at in 10 years. This is the metaphysics. It's coming. You're either going to be in for a rude awakening or wake up now. The seventh principle. The essence of hip-hop is beyond entertainment. The elements of hip-hop culture may be traded for money, honor, power, respect, food, shelter, information, and other resources. However, hip-hop and its culture cannot be bought, nor is it for sale. Hip-hop cannot be transferred or exchanged by or to anyone for any compensation at any time or at any place. Hip-hop is not a product. Hip-hop is the priceless principles of our self-empowerment. Empowering ourselves. How? Through the eighth principle. Get this too. Y'all should be on this right now. This is where the money's going to be at in the future. This is where the wealth, I should say, is going to be at as a hip-hop in the future. Companies, corporations, non- and not-for-profit organizations, as well as individuals and groups that are clearly benefiting from the use, interpretation, and or exploitation of the term hip-hop. Also an example, hip-hop and hip-hop, the three natures right there. And the expression and the terminologies of hip-hop, i.e. hip-hop and hip-hop, the three natures again, are encouraged to commission and or employ a full-time or a part-time certified hip-hop cultural specialist. There you go, colleges. There you go. Once you employ, there you go. Once you employ a certified hip-hop cultural specialist to interpret, and there's only one way you're getting that certification, that's through the Temple of Hip-Hop. That's the only way. To interpret and answer sensitive cultural questions regarding the principles and proper presentation of hip-hop's elements and culture relative to business, individuals, organizations, communities, cities, as well as other countries. Wow. That's street entrepreneurialism right there. That's how we do it. That's the physics of the metaphysics right there. Number 8, they're all the physics of the metaphysics. They're all the meta of the physics. But check that out. The 8th principle, that's the physics of it right there. Getting into these corporations who are clearly benefiting, thieving, doing all their thing, and having them hire the hip-hop cultural specialist. 9th principle, May 3rd is Rap Music Day. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to dedicate their own time and talent to self-development and for service to the communities. Every 3rd week in May is Hip Hop Appreciation Week. That's where we're at right now. During this time, hip-hoppers are encouraged to honor their ancestors, reflect upon their cultural contributions, and appreciate the elements and the principles of hip-hop culture. November is Hip Hop History Month. During this time, hip-hoppers are encouraged to participate in the creating, learning, and honoring of hip-hop's history and historical, cultural contributors. And hip-hop's history, that consciousness of hip-hop, that's the Martin Luther King's history, that's the Malcolm X's history. That's going back and looking at the ancient ancestors' history. You can go back to the elements, those ancestors, the rain. What's the history of rain? What's the history of the oceans? What's the history of land? What's the history of civilization? What's the history of birds? Really go back. That's hip-hop is consciousness. Remember, hip-hop is consciousness. We follow our consciousness and ideas and thoughts through all the nations and histories where we find ourselves. We find those similar ideas. We're consciousness. We're not hip-hop just because of a bloodline. We're hip-hop because of our consciousness. That's why I can look back in ancient Japan and see consciousness that resembles what I attune with and what I'm atoned with and where I'm at and what I'm vibrating with in 2021, even though my ancestors were not probably Japanese, not that I know of. I'm straight European stock probably, so, but I resonate with Japan. And just get that. That's culture right there, the 9th principle. That really establishes the culture right there. We have our own Rap Music Day, May 3rd. Every 3rd week in May is Hip Hop Appreciation Week. We've been doing that for 20 years, since 1999, 22 years. November is Hip Hop History Month.
Wow, the Zulu Nation's been doing that forever. But we're spelling it here, hip-hop is consciousness. That is the temple of hip-hop. That's how we celebrate Hip-Hop History Month, as a side note. That's why these spellings are so important. The 10th principle, hip-hoppers are encouraged to build meaningful and lasting relationships that rest upon love, trust, equality, and respect. Hip-hoppers are encouraged not to cheat, abuse, or deceive their friends. Wow, if we could all just do these, we'd be living in hip-hopia right now. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to hold meaningful and lasting relationships. Wow, that's exactly the opposite of the world's trying to do. They rest upon love, trust, equality, and respect. That's the promised land. Hip-hoppers are encouraged not to cheat, abuse, or deceive their friends. That's the promised land. The 11th principle, the hip-hop community exists as an international culture of consciousness and provides all races, tribes, religion, and styles of people a foundation for the communication of their best ideas and works. Hip-hop culture is united as one multi-skilled, multicultural, multi-faith, multiracial people committed to the establishment and the development of peace. This was in the United Nations before they declared the New World Order. We beat them to it because we're the true world order. We're fresh, we're real, they're fake, they're not. They don't exist. We're the only reality going on daily. We are what exists. Come on. Come on, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up. For real. I'm going to read that one again and just hear that. The hip-hop community exists. We already exist as an international culture of consciousness. The way that we think, the way that we feel, what we vibe with, who we know who we are, that we actually are our being. That provides all races, tribes, religions, and styles of people a foundation for the communication of their best ideas and works. Hip-hop culture is united as one multi-skilled, multicultural, multi-faith, multiracial people committed to the establishment and the development of peace. The Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. Peace, the 12th principle. Hip-hop culture does not intentionally or voluntarily participate in any form of hate, deceit, prejudice, or theft at any time. And at no time shall hip-hop culture engage in any violent war within itself. Those who intentionally violate the principles of this declaration of peace or intentionally reject its advice forfeit by their own actions the protections set forth herein. That's law right there. Get to it. Get with it. We don't ever participate in violence with one another. Come on. That's what other nations are doing. They're beating their own citizens over the head daily. They're the example of what not to do. This is what they don't do right here. This is what we must do, what they're not doing. Come on. 13th principle. Hip-hop culture rejects the immature impulse for unwarranted acts of violence and always seeks diplomatic, nonviolent strategies in the settlement of all disputes. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to consider forgiveness and understanding before any act of retaliation. Now check this out. War is reserved as a final solution when there is evidence that all other means of diplomatic negotiations have failed repeatedly. War is reserved as a final solution. There's violence all around us. The violence of the world, the violence of the police, the violence of the government. We live above that. We live at one minute with God. God ain't about that, debauchery and violence like that. And we never participate at war with one another. We never hurt one another, hip hop. But if we got to defend ourselves, we got to know how to defend ourselves. Practice self-defense. Self-defense is not violence. Self-defense is not violence. Being able to defend oneself is essential to self-governance, self-development, and self-growth. I always encourage, put your kids in a martial arts class. The young ladies, the young men, Young men learn how to temper, how to control their temper, how to turn their rage into creativity. Young women learn how to walk around and not be afraid because they learn how to kick somebody's ass. I've seen it. I used to teach jujitsu to kids. It was wonderful to watch the empowerment of these children learning jujitsu, especially the young girls, because they weren't going to get bullied by no dude. No dude was going to go around and try anything on them because they knew how to stop them quick and get out of there. And the dudes, the young dudes, man, watching the young men come in there with attitude problems or lack of self-esteem, build up their self-esteem because they know how to defend themselves. Self-defense. Defense. We should all know how to defend ourselves because self-defense is not violence. And that goes all the way up to all the martial arts, including all forms of weapons. But we got to know how to negotiate. We got to seek peace first and foremost. And the only time self-defense is necessary is when we say, yo, man, back off. Well, hold up. You're getting too close. Nah, man, you ain't gonna hurt me. You ain't gonna hurt my family. Yo, I'm asking you right now. I'm not responsible for what happens to you if you get too close. All right, bam. That's it. 15th principle. Hip-hoppers are encouraged. This is my favorite principle right here because this is the work. This is the work that must be done. This is Hhdopia right here. This is how we get to Hhdopia by following these instructions right here. All of them really, but the 15th principle. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to eliminate poverty, speak out against injustice, and shape a more caring society and a more peaceful world. Hip-hop culture supports a dialogue, an action that heals divisions in society, addresses the legitimate concerns of humankind, and advances the cause of peace. That's the work right there. The 15th principle right there. If you ever don't know what to do with your life, you don't know what your purpose is right there, there's your purpose right there as a hip-hopper. The 15th principle. This is your purpose, hip-hopper. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to, your purpose is to eliminate poverty, speak out against injustice, shape a more caring society and a more peaceful world. Your purpose is to support a dialogue and action that heals divisions in society, addresses the legitimate concerns of humankind, and advances the cause of peace. That's our purpose. That is our purpose. The 15th principle, hip-hoppers respect, that was the 14th principle, excuse me. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to eliminate poverty, speak out against injustice, and shape a more caring society and a more peaceful world. That's 14th principle. Hip-hop culture supports a dialogue and action that heals divisions in society, addresses the legitimate concerns of humankind, and advances the cause of peace. Now the 15th principle. Hip-hoppers respect and learn from the ways of nature. Ha ha! Respect and learn from the ways of nature. Get outside. Look at the lawn. Big up to my brother Adonis said just take a square foot of lawn, 1 square foot of lawn, and stare at it for an hour. And then do it again and again. And stare at a square foot of lawn or a square foot outside, a square foot of nature, just a square foot, 12 by 12 by 12 by 12, square foot of nature, and just look at it for an hour, at the bugs that go through it, at all the details that are in that little square foot of nature. You want to study the ways of nature, you'll learn about yourself. Go out and sit on a mountaintop somewhere. Go out and jump in a cold river and a new fresh lake. Go out and ground and put your feet on the bare earth and ground onto the earth. It's called grounding. Go out there, sun gaze when the sun's going down or the sun's coming up in the morning. Give yourself a few minutes to just look at that sun. When it hits a certain point, you can look at it and it won't burn your retina, and you just look at it and it clears out like all of these things that are in our body. Like this, our body is crystal. Our body is crystallographic. So when we get that sunlight, it bounces through our eyes, it bounces all through our internal organs, like that crystallographic nature, the way that like crystals reflect light, refract it too. When you see that, that's our body right there. That's an example of what our actual physical body is. Big up to Marcel Vogel. We're not going to talk about it today, but big up to Marcel Vogel for that. The human body, the way the blood works, and what we're made of, we are crystals. We're crystallographic in nature. And if you look at your hand, it looks like, your palm of your hand, your palm print looks like a leaf. Go look at a leaf next to your hand. The bottom of a leaf looks like a palm. You look at the desert earth, it looks like the palm of the hand. You look at like the people who live in desert climates, they look like the desert. You look at people who live in the jungle, they look like the jungle. We are nature itself. You look at people who live in the inner city, we look like the inner city because that's our environment. So how much are we out getting in nature too, into our natural environment? I've been to every city in the United States and all over Europe too, in those cities in Europe. Nature is not that far away for anybody. Come on, get out in nature. Don't take no excuse. Take your family, get out in nature and observe the ways of nature. Hip-hop is respect and learn from the ways of nature, regardless of where we are on this planet. Hip-hop culture holds sacred our duty to contribute to our own survival. This is our sacred duty to contribute to our own survival as independent, free-thinking beings in and throughout the universe. This planet, commonly known as Earth, is our nurturing parent, and hip-hoppers are encouraged to respect nature and all creations and inhabitants of nature. Respect that nature. Go outside. Feed some birds. Feed some squirrels. Feed some fish. Find out what they're supposed to eat, not your leftovers that you don't want. Give them what they're supposed to eat. Feed nature. Water the plants. Water a plant. You're feeding nature that way. Talk to nature. Talk to the plant. It can hear you. Plants can actually feel us. There's a documentary on it called The Key of Life, I believe. And there's a documentary, and this is a science too. And Marcel Vogel, once again, even worked on this. But plants communicate with humans. They hook them up to EKG meters, and they can feel like somebody sets an intention to a plant about burning the plant starts stressing out because it can feel the intention of the human. And a plant can feel the intention of a human that it's used to miles away. That is fascinating. That the mitochondria, it's like this other dimension that plants live in that's all connected because they're all part of the oxygen that they're producing. It's like oxygen is like a water. The plants are all connected, this neural network of plant life, that they can feel a human that they know who's thinking an intention about that plant miles away, whether it's a good intention or a bad intention. Well, plants can think that. If we think love, we can speak love into our plants through feeling that love, singing them a song. The Hopi teach that. They used to sing. I believe that this is why we get on our knees to worship. I really believe this. I don't have any evidence of this other than I just know this. Why do people get on their knees to pray? Well, because when our ancestors used to plant seeds, we were on our knees as our ancestors praying over the seed, the sprout. And as it was growing, we were praying. As it was growing, we were singing to the plants. Like literally all of our every single one of our ancestors did this who's listening to this. Every one of them. Every single one of them prayed over the seeds they planted because life depends on those seeds growing forward and growing up. And the health of the plants. There's all kinds of science on this, so-called science, but people, this is pre-science. This is just what's known. This is the love of wisdom, philosophy, the real philosophy, the philo, the love, and the Sophie, wisdom, the love of wisdom. This is wisdom in action, praying, getting on your knees and praying over a seed as it grows. That's where praying on our knees before God comes from. Not some servitude, we're so unworthy. And we kind of are, the way we're acting right now, let's be real. But, getting on our knees to pray for a plant. Hip-hop culture holds sacred our duty to contribute to our own survival as independent, free-thinking beings in and throughout the universe. This planet, commonly known as Earth, is our nurturing parent, and hip-hoppers are encouraged to respect nature and all creations and inhabitants of nature. The 16th principle, hip-hop's pioneers, legends, teachers, elders, and ancestors shall not be inaccurately quoted, misrepresented, or disrespected at any time. Hip-hop's pioneers, and this is so important, this is mainstream. This is what you knock them out with, mainstream culture, MTV, all you suckers. 16th principle, hip-hop's pioneers, legends, and the underground. Don't be dissing these pioneers and legends. You hear it all the time. You can't be dissing them. It doesn't make no sense to the building of our nation to be dissing the pioneers. Pioneers be dissing each other all the time. They should stop that too, because it's just disempowering. But in the future, ain't nobody going to be able to say nothing about Kool Herc. 100 years from now, somebody says something disparagingly about Kool Herc, they're going to get knocked out. For real. 100 years from now, you are not going to be talking, nobody is going to have no kind of way to talk, nothing about the hip-hop's pioneers and elders. Teachers, elders, ancestors, legends. No, in the future, nobody will say that, because that would be like talking smack about, Jacob and the 12 sons of Israel. Like, you ain't going to go out and talk no smack about Jacob and the Israelites. Their forefathers. You ain't going to talk no smack about them. You ain't going to talk about no smack about no Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash. I mean, talking no smack about no KRS-One. Nobody's going to be doing that in the future. No way. You can't even do it now. You ain't going to do it around me or a lot of us. They just ain't allowed in the culture. Hip-hop's pioneers, legends, teachers, elders, and ancestors shall not be inaccurately quoted, misrepresented, or disrespected at any time. No one should profess to be a hip-hop pioneer or legend unless they can prove with facts and or witnesses their credibility and contributions to hip-hop culture. You got to be able to prove it. People will say it. The 17th principle, hip-hoppers are encouraged to share resources. Come on, let's get together, one for all and all for one. Hip-hoppers should give as freely and as often as possible. It is the duty of every hip-hopper to assist whenever possible in the relief of human suffering and in the correction of injustice. Hip-hop is shown the highest respect when hip-hoppers respect each other. Hip-hop culture is preserved, nurtured, and developed when hip-hoppers preserve, nurture, and develop one another. Love, nurture, develop, preserve one another. Let's show each other this respect. Come on, that's why we're getting down with that, with the natures of hip-hop. We got to get this right. We got to get this together so we can nurture and develop one another. We got to have some kind of common thinking amongst ourselves, and it starts for every hip-hopper with the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. So we give to an average rap fan, we give the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace to any rap fan. Anybody who listens to rap music that you know, you should give a copy of the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. It's off of your hands. Once you give it to them, once you give them a copy of it and a physical copy that they can read, it's out of your hands, it's in their hands, and it's their responsibility now. You fulfilled your purpose. Do it. Anyone you know who listens to rap music, anywhere you go, hand it out at the next jam. Hand it out. You don't got to forcefully give it to people and have them throw it on the floor. You could set up a table. Oh, I got this is the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. And all you got to do is hand it out to people who want a copy of it. Just make it available for your community. Hand a copy to your friends, the people you love, who listen to rap and appreciate rap. That's what you give this Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace to, the average rap fan. Hip-hoppers, I'm going to read 17 again, and then we'll close with the 18th. Hip-hoppers are encouraged to share resources. Hip-hoppers should give as freely and as often as possible. It is the duty of every hip-hopper to assist whenever possible in the relief of human suffering and the correction of injustice. Hip-hop is shown the highest respect when hip-hoppers respect each other. Hip-hop culture is preserved, nurtured, and developed when hip-hop is preserved, nurture, and develop one another. Come on. We are our brothers and sisters' keeper in that way. Look out for one another. The 18th principle. Hip-hop culture maintains a healthy, caring, and wealthy central hip-hop guild, fully aware and invested with the power to promote, teach, interpret, modify, and defend the principles of this hip-hop Declaration of Peace. It's not up to any individual to do that. This is this institution. This is what gives the Temple of Hip-Hop permission to exist. This 18th principle is why the Temple of Hip-Hop exists. Hip-hop culture maintains a healthy, caring, and wealthy central hip-hop guild, fully aware and invested with the power to promote, teach, interpret, modify, and defend the principles of this hip-hop declaration of peace. May 16th, 2001, May 16th, 2021, 20 years, the 20th anniversary. 20 years ago, this document was written. See how God was at work? Some of you might not even be 20 years old. This document's even older than you. See how God works in your life? Wow, what a gift. I wish when I was 20 there was a hip-hop declaration of peace around so I didn't have to learn about it when I was 30, you know? Big up. I mean, we're putting this in our kids' hands and they're growing up into this now. This is real. This is how civilization and how culture is built. Come on, you see, these are high-level principles. This is high levels of humanity. This is high-level metaphysics, high-level physics. Come on. Don't just read about it, be about it. Don't just be about it, be it itself. Be the hip-hop declaration of peace. You become it. You become a hip-hop declaration of peace or a hip-hop declaration for peace in your day-to-day living by living those principles, sharing them with your community, sharing them with your friends, sharing them with strangers, CEOs, coaches, lawyers, police officers. Hand that to the police chief and say, hey, if you guys want to understand what's going on in the inner cities, read this, because this is what's going on. Can you imagine if police officers were handing this out? Come on. FTP. But come on. Give them a chance. Like, there are police officers who are hip-hoppers. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there are. I've seen, by rolling with the teacher, I don't know how many police officers have gotten autographs from him and spit his rhymes, even Black Cop. Black cop, black cop, black cop, black cop. And I've seen black cops being like, black cop, black cop. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I've seen cops freestyle, knowing every lyric to every KRS song, every Rakim song. So come on, give this to them. Let them be aware of that. This is maturity. Come on, we're talking about civilization here. Let's get together and do this. It's real like that. You know, it's so real for me. I'll tell you how real the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace. I'll tell you how the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace changed my life when I came across it. I didn't hear about it. I didn't know about it. You know, they'd already gone to the United Nations sometime around 2003. Late 2003, early 2004. I was at a friend's house. He had the internet. I said, hey, my G, can you look up the Temple of Hip Hop and see if they have a website or what's up about with the Temple of Hip Hop online? I didn't have a computer at home. I didn't even see a need for a computer. I was living at one with nature in that way. I was landscaping, earning for my family, listening to music and reading books. I didn't see any value in the internet, really. I didn't, you know. I saw value in books and calling people and face-to-face communication. I still see value in all of that. I went to my friend's house and he had a computer and it was interesting. I went to his house to make a beat because one time I couldn't even buy a beat, you know. I said I was in a rock band. I was in a punk rock band with my brother, I'm like the Bad Brains type band. And you know, I was always into hip hop music, and I kind of rap style. I had a rap style over the punk rock, and you know, but I wanted to start rapping over beats. And I asked these MCs that I knew, these rappers. I didn't call them MCs. I asked these rappers I knew, yo, can I get a beat? They laughed at me. Said, no way, dude. I was like, yo, but I can rap. You hear me rapping over these crunchy guitars and this drum kit. And they're like, nah, you ain't no rapper. Nah, I wasn't. I'm an MC. But I couldn't even buy a beat. I offered to buy a beat, and he's like, nah, I don't sell my beats, G. I don't sell my beats, G. I was like, all right, cool. So I called up a homie of mine who played guitar, had a drum machine. I was like, let's make a beat. He's like, cool, man, let's try this. And so I go over there. And so he's working on the drum pad, and I mean, just think about that for a minute. I couldn't even buy a beat. If I put a call out on my Facebook page, I'll get 30 beats right now. I I've given money for beats, but I don't got to pay for beats. My first, 6 albums, I didn't pay for one of those beats. 7 albums, I didn't pay for one of those beats. I've given those albums out for free too. So, because it's a community service, I love making the music. But I couldn't buy a beat, and the people gave me the dopest beats for free, like the fattest beats I ever heard for free. Just on the strength of the work I was doing, because that, to me, they're like, yo, Zin, you do so much in the community with the Temple of Hip Hop, you can have these beats. You ain't got to pay me for those beats. These are people who make money off their beats too. I'm not getting no whack beats. I'm getting real beats by producers who sell their beats for money. But I'm getting them for free because of the work that I've been doing. It's an exchange there. They see the value of the free work that the Temple of Hip Hop's doing and that I've been doing. They give them their free, but I couldn't buy a beat, okay? I couldn't buy a beat, so I go to my friend's house. He's a rocker. He don't really make hip hop beats. He's into techno music, but he's making a dope rhythm. He understands rhythm, so he's helped making a beat that I can start writing my first rap to, right? I say, hey, let's check out online the Temple of Hip Hop. There's a Temple of Hip Hop website online. I see the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. I'm like, yo, what is this? I read it. I'm like, yo, I got to get with this like immediately. Can you print me up a copy? He prints me up a copy. I go home, I just read it over and over and over and over and over again. I'm like, how did I not know this was happening? How do I become part of this? This is the realest thing I've ever read. This is truth right here. The Hip Hop Declaration of Peace was in my hand. I went out and bought a computer so I could get on that Temple of Hip Hop website. No lie. This is actually what happened. Like for real. Like this is the reality that I live in. I bought a computer just so I could go onto the Temple of Hip Hop's website just because I heard about it through the KRS-One albums, but I actually had a copy of something that was really done, the physics of the Metaphysics. The actual Hip Hop Declaration of Peace was in my hand. I went out and bought a computer at a time when I was supporting a family of 5. We didn't have no money for no computer like that. Get online. It was a whole new experience, But I got online. And then a few months later, somebody hands me a flyer because I was online. I met this person online who was saying he was Temple of Hip Hop. And then I went to a KRS-One concert and I started passing out these flyers. I looked at the flyer. That was the flyer that was asking for $25 a week, $100 a month to be sent down to the Temple of Hip Hop building fund. The rest is history. I go down, I start sending the checks. The teacher calls me, leaves a message on my answering machine. Then, I'm not able to get a hold of him. Then months later, I get an email inviting me down to the roundtable discussion on January 9th, 2005. Next thing I know, I'm right there standing next to the teacher. A few months later, I write this out, Zin Uru, and I'm living this, the promised land of Martin Luther King in real life. That's how it happened. It happened fast like that. Early 2004, by late 2004, I'd already moved, and by the end of a year, by the end of 1 year, I'd already gotten an invitation down to the Temple of Hip Hop and had the teacher call me. From a year earlier, not even having a computer or the internet, I didn't care about none of that. I still don't really, but hey, it's a useful tool for right now. But these lessons that I'm teaching, these are better in person, trust me. When you guys see me in person giving this lesson to 100 people, there's so much more I get to say. There's so much more of that interaction, and you feel through the energy. But I'm glad that this exists for the future generations. And I do hope there's some of you out there value these lessons enough that you archive these for me. I'm archiving them right now, but that's just my hard drive. And I hope that there are those who see the value in these lessons and that what I'm talking about here is real. This is a real historical figure right here talking to you. Zin Uru, I'm like a real person who really went through this. And these opportunities don't come back. 2005 doesn't come back. Time keeps moving forward and keeps moving on. So create your own history. Create your own persona in this. But take all these lessons that I got up on YouTube, download them, YouTube, the MP4 connector, download them, please. Download them and save them in an archive for the future in case they get taken down or the blackout happens or whatever happens. Put them on a DVD, put them on a flash drive. Please help me preserve these.
That's a real story. I went from reading the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace to becoming Zin Uru. And I would say by 18 months, by 18 months after I read the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace, I had already been on tour with the teacher for a couple months. A year and a half later, I'd already started touring the world and became Zin Uru, and then eventually Minista Zin Uru. Getting to share all this insight with you, like I said, that's been 15 years, 16 years now. I've been waiting to give this lesson because this has all been happening, and I knew it all back then. And as it was being revealed, I knew the value of what this is, not only to myself as an individual, but also to the collective. Our individual collective consciousness, hip hop as consciousness. Let's wake up, my nobility. You can all do better than me. I know it. I know who I am, but I know I'm fresh. I know I'm dope. I know I do some amazing things. I learned from the teacher. I learned from Martin Luther King. I learned from Bob Marley. I learned from my good, close friends. I learned from Christ. I learned from God. I learned from my so-called adversaries. I learned from nature. We all learn from these things, but what lessons are we learning? What lesson are you learning about those things that are happening in your life? Small miracles happen all the time, but most people choose not to accept them. They choose to ignore them. But I know if you're a hip-hopper, you've got some amazing experiences in your life. I'm glad I got this gift to be able to talk like this and yap like this, and that's just a gift God gave me. You know, and I'm giving it back to God in that way. Others are writers or artists or all other kind of things. We're all equal here. We preach equality. We teach it. We live it. You know how much I respect somebody who can grow a garden that produces food? I love the garden. I'm not good at it. And what a funny thing, huh? I talk about landscaping every week. I'm okay at landscaping. I can make a fresh-looking garden. But growing food and stuff like that, it takes me a lot of energy and time. I can dig the trenches. I can dig the holes. I can even pluck the food and clean it and do all that stuff. I can cook with it too. But you know how much I respect somebody who can grow a garden, who can build a house? I can do some carpentry things. I can help build a house, but somebody who can build a house, an adobe house, like, oh man, you know how much it's like the respect I have for people who do things that feed us and clothe us and house us, like with their hands. Those who can build, you know, constructions with their hands. Man, that's amazing. Welders, yeah, so much respect for somebody who can weld metal together and make something that holds it together. Mechanics, like for real. Those valuable life skills, which ones do you got? What human skills do you have? Wake up, my nobility, for the sake of our children and our children's children forever. Like I said earlier, you're going to either wake up now or wake up when it's going to be a rude awakening. Either way, you're going to wake up. But there's those who are going to cling to the system. They're going to fall with the system. And we might be able to grab a few of them up onto the boat from a life raft, you know, but they're going down with the Titanic, most of them. We've got Hip-Hopia. They're following with the system, the New World Order. We are the true world order. We are Hip-Hopia itself. Peace, love, unity, safely having fun, health, love, awareness, and wealth. The gospel of hip-hop. What are the metaphysics of your self-creation? Who are you creating yourself to be? What are you creating your future to be? What are you visualizing and feeling into existence? Surrender to God, and God will give you all visions and greater visions than you could ever achieve for yourself through God. God is guiding our direction. God is looking over us. God is here with us, Hip-Hoppa. Rise up, my nobility. Rise up and be who God created us to be. So much peace, so much love, so much joy, so much happiness, so much grace, so much forgiveness, so much being to my nobility. Happy Hip Hop Appreciation Week. Happy 20th anniversary to the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace. Big up to all the ancestors, the pioneers, the elders, the mothers, the fathers, and the teachers who all brought us here to where we are today.
You are so loved. You are so respected. You are so worthy. Now wake up and become the nation that God sees us as, and there it is. Hip!